Galloway's Support Through Sight Loss presents a Zoom question and answer session with Sarah Hooper from Water Park Lakeland Adventure Centre.
Right, so Sarah has joined us today. Sarah's one of the instructors at Water Park, and before that she was an accountant before she decided to have a complete career change. So some of you'll know Sarah from Water Parks and others might not, but over to Sarah.
Hi, well, good afternoon and thanks for tuning in. Yeah, so like James said, I'm one of the tutors at Water Park, and I'm fairly average at most things. So I'm broadly qualified, but I'm not particularly good at anything. And when I've done this talk before, I want to get that out there, and not out of any false modesty. It's the truth. Because what I want to get across is that you don't have to be expert canoers, paddlers, climbers, mountaineers to go and have what are really quite extraordinary adventures. You just, you have to have a little bit of skill. You have to have a lot of adventure, I suppose, strive for it, and not be afraid to sort of get out there and give things a go. So the trip that I'm going to talk about happened 10 years ago, actually. I was there 10 years ago today in Canada, and it was all based around canoeing. Now, what made that possible for me was I was given a grant by an organisation called the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust. And what that is when Churchill died, a lot of money was donated in his memory, and his close family and friends basically decided that rather than building a thing to him, they decided to create what they refer to as a living memorial. So every year they award funds for what they call travelling fellowships. Anybody can apply, and there are a broad range of categories. So, I mean, I'm quite humbled in this, really. It was a real honour to get this, but, the sorts of people that have had these kind of awards in the past, Baroness Tanny Gray Thompson, for example, maybe 20, 30 years ago now, she was given a grant, and she went to New Zealand because at the time New Zealand were the forefront really in training for Paralympians, and she went over there, worked with their sort of their kind of team and training team, and then came back to the UK, and obviously shared her knowledge and went on to do great things. There's also maybe less famous people who researchers, doctors, sort of youth workers, the police, forensic scientists, people like that who have picked countries who are ahead of us in sort of pioneering work for the field that they work in, and they've gone to those places to learn and bring things back to the country. So people have gone to sort of cities in America where gang culture is and has been quite prevalent, and they've learned about how people are starting to combat it there, and they've brought it back to the cities in England that are starting, struggling with that kind of thing. And all sorts of medical research has been progressed because of these kind of international opportunities, really. So mine sort of sits, I guess, really fairly, insignificant in all of that, because what I've done since I've come back, really, I've tried to promote the Winston Churchill Trust. I've given quite a lot of talks to local organisations, and I've done all of that for charity. And really what I sort of wanted to do was just to try and inspire people to go and have their own adventure. And like I say, to kind of sort of dispel the myth that you have to be brilliant, and you have to be kind of, you know, at the top of your field or anything to go and do these sort of really quite out there adventures.
So it's about learning new skills and things then.
Yeah, so that's kind of really what I sort of hope to achieve by kind of, you know, publicising what I did. So my thing was all about canoeing, and as you know, at Water Park we spend a lot of time working with children mostly, but also you know, with individuals such as yourselves who come and do things with us and are really, really out of their comfort zone. So children come to us, and sometimes, you know, they may as well have been dropped off at the moon, because Water Park is so alien for them. It's everything is very different. They're properly outside of their comfort zone, and they feel like they're in the wilderness. You know, where's the nearest shop? You know, where's the TV? Where's the, you know, it's very, very alien for them. And I know for a lot of people who've come with Galloways, certainly a lot of people who've come, you know, quite soon after losing their sight, it's massive. You know, it every year it blows us away that people, you know, with various visual impairments come and jump off rocks in the gill and go sailing by themselves and kayaking. And it really is, you know, watching those children and individuals such as yourselves. I sort of got the point where it's like, well, when was the last time that I was outside of my comfort zone? You know, when was the last time that I really felt like I was in the wilderness? You know, and I have been in the past, but I was like, you kind of lose it. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go and have that proper adventure out of my comfort zone experience, to try and give me really that kind of sort of, to remember what it's like for a lot of people who come to us. So the main element of my trip was ended up being a trip on the river called the Ray River, which is in the far north of Canada, above the tree line, above the Arctic Circle, and it's about as remote as you can probably get. So to get to the river, I flew to Toronto. From there, I flew to Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, and from there we got on a float plane and we flew for 3 hours on the float plane. Now I wonder if I can just change this picture. Oh, hang on. I wonder if I can change this picture to a picture of me getting ready from the float plane. Here we go. Can you see that now?
Yep.
Yeah, picture's changed. Okay, so I didn't want to go on a commercial trip. I didn't want to go on a river where loads of people still went. So I started searching on the internet to try and find out how I was going to achieve that. And in a roundabout way, I ended up getting put in contact with this guy in the middle, in the blue. He's a vet from the States called David Plant, really, really experienced canoeer who'd semi-guided and co-guided trips in the far north. And he was really interested in a guy called John Ray, who some of you may have heard of. Now, he wanted to plan a trip on the Ray River, which was up in the north, named after John Ray, that I would say had not been paddled before. Now, I'm not saying nobody had ever been on it, but it certainly was not a river that any organised trips had gone to before. There was certainly no information about it, and it really was a case of, you know, we showed the pilot the map, we said, take us there, and he was like, oh, I've never been there before, and he dropped us off. So that for me was really, you know, the adventure. Let's go paddle a river that nobody has ever done before. Not because it was particularly hard, you know, there was some rapids on it, but it wasn't a particularly difficult technical river. It was just a long way away, and in that part of the world there are so many rivers to explore. So the team that he put together was myself, who was very much the sort of the tag along. he'd had a friend of his, Mark, who was another vet, and the older chap on the side there was a guy called Gene. He was 77 at the time. He was amazing. Yeah, that was our little team for the 3 weeks. So I've told the story a few times, obviously since, and some people said to me, so you met a guy on the internet? Yep. And you flew a few thousand miles to meet up with him and 3 other guys that you didn't know? Yep. To go and spend 3 weeks with them in the middle of nowhere? I was like, yeah. Now it sounds crazy, and even when I say it now, it should have been something that I was nervous about, really, but I wasn't, and I can't tell you why. For me, it was just one of those things that it just all came together, and it never occurred to me that I might not like them, or might not get on with them, or they might be weird, or might, it just never occurred to me. And I just set off with them with just this, I don't know, just feeling that it was going to be all right. And it was amazing. But I think looking at it now, it was a big risk, because I couldn't get away from them. We had a satellite phone with us for emergencies, which we never used. But the truth of it was that the only way to get home before we reached the end, where we had a commercial flight, was to basically charter another float plane at a cost of £5,000 or £10,000 to take me home, and that was obviously never going to be an option. So yeah, it was a strange thing, but it came together. A little bit about the Ray River, because I think John Ray is quite an interesting character. You may know a little bit about this sort of the explorers around the time of John Franklin and trying to find the Northwest Passage. Well, John Ray was an Arctic explorer at the time, and he was very different from everybody else, because he turned up into that environment and was very, very respectful of it. So he looked at what the local people did, and he thought, well, that's what they've been doing and that's what works. And he learned from them, and he lived like they did, as opposed to this sort of, I suppose, the traditional way of English exploration, to turn up with your, massive team in your boat, all your, your captains, and you full, dressing for dinner and eating the way you would normally eat, with fancy foods and 3-course meals for dinner and all that kind of it, and trying to live in big groups, where he recognised that it didn't work like that. In the Arctic, in the winter, you have to separate into small groups, because that's how the land allows you to survive, and you come back together in the summer, but then in the winter you split off and you smaller groups again. Now, he discovered the remains of John Franklin and his team, and he was the one that came back to England and said it looked like they were they were cannibals at the end of it. That they looked like, and there was evidence to him to say that they'd resorted to cannibalism. And Lady Franklin was not happy about this at the time. She didn't want that being said about her husband, obviously, and she was friends with Charles Dickens. So Charles Dickens set about basically slating John Ray in the London press, saying he was lying and all the rest of it. And as it's come out later on, he wasn't lying at all, and they probably did. They didn't find the Northwest Passage, even though Franklin, in history books gets the credit for it. It was actually John Ray that found the missing link. So that whole part of it was quite an interesting sort of historical link to the trip. Now the river itself, like I said, it wasn't a particularly difficult river. There were, a few rapids, but nothing too major. The truth of being in that environment as well is that if it is hard, you've just got to what's referred to as portage around it, so carry your kit and carry your canoe around it. So we did do a fair chunk of that, really, which is not my cup of tea, really. But in Canada, it's very difficult to find a river that you can paddle without having to portage. So for them, it's just part of going canoeing. At some point, you're going to have to lug your canoe around. So that was definitely some part of it. I think the longest was maybe half a mile one day, which is a long way to carry canoes and all your kit. The wildlife and the sort of the scenery up in that area. So there's a line it's called the tree line, and in the far north, above that line, you just don't get any trees. The geography and the climate is such that trees just don't grow. So it's very, very flat, and it's known as the barren lands. But what that basically means is that you can stand and turn 360 degrees, and it's like, well, I suppose it's how I imagine being in a desert. Like there's just nothing as far as you can see forever, which again, I guess for some people could be quite frightening, but it was just so amazing and so peaceful just to think that there was just the four of us, you know, and the animals who were living there. There was a lot of flowers, a lot of different kinds of flowers on the ground, and in the summer it's very, very colourful. The other thing that people refer to there is it's they call it permafrost. So it's only like so much of the land that ever defrosts every year. A lot of it stays frozen. And the Arctic Circle, I don't know, many of you may already know this, but the Arctic Circle is the actual definition of it is that above this line there is one day a year where the sun never sets and one day a year when the sun never rises. So this is why people talk about there being 6 months of summer and 6 months of winter. So when I was there, it pretty much was daylight the whole time. So we would watch the sun set, but it never quite set properly before it was coming up again. So I really like that as well, because I'm not, I think most of us, we don't really like the sort of, the early nights in the winter. So that was brilliant. The downside for the people who live up there, and our trip ended at a little Inuit village called Coulton, is that having 6 months of the year where there is very little daylight is very, very difficult, and people living in those communities do suffer with very high rates of depression and suicide and substance addiction, because and from what I've been told and the limited amount of things that I've read, it is largely attributable to that 6 months period where there's really no light, not very much light, and not very much daylight. But obviously the time I was there, I got the best of it. The wildlife up there was interesting. We saw quite a lot of caribou, which I guess I've called reindeers. So we saw those, and we saw some quite large herds of them in the distance, which was nice to see. We saw Arctic foxes, Arctic wolves. We saw lots of different birds. I've no idea what most of them were, but there's quite a lot around there. And there are bears up there, grizzlies. We did come across one. We'd gone for a bit of a walk from the camp one day, and we were just going for a hike, and the chap Dave sort of came out with a few choice words and kind of told us to stop. I thought he was joking. Anyway, not that far in front of us was a bear asleep on some rocks, a grizzly bear. So I was backing away quite quickly. Before I knew it, I wasn't expecting this, but he set off a bear banger, woke up the bear. And at this point, I was really thinking, like, why would you wake up a sleeping bear? But obviously it wasn't discussion at the time. This bear woke up, stood up on his, back legs, had a look around. They set off another bear banger, and this bear ran away. Probably only took a few minutes, the whole thing, but it felt like forever. And then when I was sort of asking him afterwards, he was like, well, we had to scare it away because if we'd just let it woken up, it might have, come closer to the camp investigating. So that kind of made it a bit real, really. You never think that anything is going to, happen, and I still don't think it's going to happen, but bear attacks do happen. They've never, or there's been, what he told me was there's not been any recorded attacks by grizzlies of groups smaller than, bigger than 4, sorry. So basically they've all happened on individual travellers or people in sort of small groups, 2s or 3s. Not quite sure that was enough to convince me, but we didn't have any more trouble with bears. We did see another one that appeared to be kind of sort of coming towards and having a bit of a look at the camp, but we just moved on, and I think we were quite lucky after that. The village of Coulton is in the area where they, in the winter they do get bothered by polar bears sometimes, and grizzlies in the summer. And the village is set out in a sort of a square shape, and it's a kind of unwritten rule that the families who live on the 4 corners kind of keep a lookout. Like they all have dogs to sort of warn of bears approaching. And one of the locals that we spoke to said that it sounds crazy this, but apparently what happens is when bears do come into the village, somebody ends up shooting them, and then the word's put out, the nearest butcher comes along, does their thing, and the bear meat gets distributed amongst the villagers, and it's all very matter of fact, really. So I guess that's just a way, a way of life, and it makes sense, I suppose. What else would you do with it? So yeah, that was our bear encounter. When we got to the end in Coughletook, there was a commercial. We had booked a commercial flight to take us home, and there was I won't call it a campsite really. There was a bit of land outside the village that we camped on for the night that we were there, and it was really strange because some kids went past on their bikes, saw us there, and we were kind of like celebrities. Next thing we knew, there was a load more kids come just sort of talk to us and find out who we were and where we'd come from. There's another river that ends at Coughletook, which is the Coppermine River, which is a really well paddled and quite famous river, quite a commercial river, and that's the other side of the village. So they were really quite taken with the fact that we turned up from the other side, which I suppose kind of added a bit of, oh wow, like this river really doesn't get paddled as we thought, because nobody sort of turned up from this side before. And it's actually now, well, I think from the year after, David's linked with a guiding company, actually put it on their itinerary. So there is actually now has been groups going and paddling the Ray River as a commercial trip since. So that that kind of feels nice to sort of think we were out there and kind of the first ones to do it. Yeah. So yeah, so that it certainly was like, you know, exciting, definitely exciting, you know, and waiting for the float plane to take us off, and being dropped off in the middle of nowhere, and not even really knowing where we were going to be dropped off, because it was just like somewhere around here, you know, the pilot was looking for a suitable place to land. I don't know if I can let's see if I can put this on the screen share. Back to Zoom. Don't know. No, I don't think I'm savvy enough to do that. I've got another picture somewhere, but I can't seem to get it on. I'll leave that for now. So that was a big part of the trip that I did when I was out there. I did also spend quite a lot of time in the Algonquin National Park, which we were briefly talking about. There we go. Which we were briefly talking about beforehand. Now, in terms of accessible places to go and canoe, the Algonquin is definitely one of the most accessible. It's only 3 hours north of Toronto. It's got 2,500 kilometers of rivers in it. If I pull up my notes, it's got I can't remember how many lakes, over 1,000 lakes. It's like, you know, and there's no villages in there, so it's one of those parks. If you've been to any of the ones in the States, you know, a lot of their national parks, you go in and pay like an entry fee to go in, but there's no settlements in there at all. It is just wilderness. Lots and lots of, you know, different kind of you know, suggested itineraries and rivers and you know, trips, circular trips and that to do. But it properly feels very, very, very chilled and very, very peaceful, really, I think. Now they have bears. They have brown bears, not the grizzlies. And within the park there are sort of camping spots. So you don't just go and you need a permit to go in, but you don't just go and pitch a tent anywhere. And the spots, when I say they're a camping spot, it's somewhere near what's called what they refer to as a thunderbox, which is effectively a toilet. So, you know, your big hole in the ground with a box on top and a toilet seat put in the top of the box. So that's your kind of your camping pitch, really, to go somewhere near where those facilities are. I went on a guided trip for 2 days in the Algonquin, and it was with a company that they sold it as Wolf House, I think they called it. And anyway, when I found out a bit more about this, there's lots of wolf packs in the Algonquin, and 30 odd years ago the rangers wanted to get a bit more of a handle on where these wolf packs were settling and how they were moving about. And what they would do is they would sort of, in some kind of systematic way, they would go around the park and they would howl, and then they would wait and see if they got any howls back, so they could sort of track where they were. Anyway, one of the rangers said, "Oh, why don't we invite, you know, the public to come along and have a go if they want to?" So so they put it in their local newsletter, you know, we're going to be doing some wolf howling if anyone wants to come and join us, thinking they'd get, you know, half a dozen people. Well, they got thousands. And this has become quite a big thing now, in that they have these you know, regular dates throughout the year where they invite the public up, and they literally turn up in their, you know, thousands to howl, just, you know, oh, just, you know, and then see if they get any response. So we did hear wolves while I was there. We did do a bit of howling, but we never got any response. but we did hear howls some other times. And then the guy who'd been my guide, Alexis, he was kind enough to lend me his canoe for a couple of days afterwards. So I got to go and have a little trip by myself. And again, like, I've done some trips in the Lake District, a couple of camps where I've hiked out and I've camped out by myself, but I've not done anything, you know, on the scale of camping out by myself in Algonquin on a canoe trip. So that was, well, it was amazing. It was obviously a little bit scary. So I'd sort of set off. I had a bit of a plan, you know, I'd kind of got my route. Had a night out, you know. I don't think it's something I could do for a long time, because I think I would just miss the company. I actually, you know, was only out there for one night. Well, kind of ended up being two, but it was certainly like something I definitely thought was worthwhile doing. The reason I ended up staying out for 2 nights is because as I was heading back the next day, the wind had picked up and I had a long paddle on the lake with a direct headwind, and it was just massive. It was a really big lake. It was head-on wind. There was, you know, massive waves. It was sort of like being on the ocean, and I just had to admit that I wasn't gonna get anywhere. So I found another little camp spot, and I thought I'd just have to sort of ride it out. But the problem was that I was due to be on a trip with joining a wilderness canoe therapy group the next day, so I had to get back. So fortunately, what happened was we had this massive storm, thunder and lightning, and then about 3 o'clock in the morning, it just stopped and it just went still. So I packed everything up, started paddling. And all the clouds had went. It was just a completely clear night, shooting stars everywhere. I've not really ever experienced anything like it. And I paddled this lake with no wind in the, you know, pitch darkness, well, apart from moonlight. Managed to somehow, I still don't quite know how, managed to find the right portage trail, carried my canoe across the portage bit to get back on the other lake I needed to get home on, and landed up about 8 o'clock in the morning, just in time to get my lift up to the next spot where I was going. So that was a real adventure that I sort of didn't see coming. But it, you know, again, it was just, I think you know, sort of try these things and see what happens. So that was great. So that's kind of it mostly. Like I say, what I did, I think if you sort of remember anything from this, I think it would be great if you all had a look at the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust website. You know, like I say, every year I think they give away 100 fellowships every year, over 10 different categories. You know, it could be something you're interested in with your work, it could be your hobbies, you know, it could or could not be anything to do with, having a visual impairment, for example, but I think, you know, if you have got something that you're really passionate about and you think, oh, you know, I'd like to develop that, or I was talking to I can't remember who it was, but a few years back I was talking to one of your group, a lady who played tennis, and she was telling me I think there's a country that's quite big in the adaptive tennis. And I was saying to her, well, apply to the Churchill Trust and go over there and go and play tennis in their adaptive program, and then, you know, see what's so great over there and bring it back and get it, you know, implemented into your sort of community. But I think there are massive opportunities out there. And the other thing is that I heard about the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust about probably about 5 or 6 years before I applied for this. And when I heard about it, I was very dismissive, because it was like, it just didn't seem right. I was like, so what? So somebody gave you money to go and have a holiday? And they're like, well, it's not a holiday. You know, I did more than go on holiday. You know, there was a purpose to it. I was like, okay, and what did you have to do when you came back? Did you have to write a report? And what else do you have to do? Well, they like you to do some of the things you say you're going to do, but nobody checks up on you about it. You know, and there's no you know, there's no sort of comeback if you don't, and all the rest of it. And I was like, okay. And it really did seem not that plausible. And then a friend of mine actually was given a grant to go and study Chinese dance, and that's sort of when I started thinking, okay, it is quite real, it is quite achievable. You know, whilst it is undoubtedly oversubscribed, you know, and it's reasonably competitive, it's far better odds than buying a lottery ticket. So I would really, you know, advise you all to think about it, you know, talk about it, you know, if you have a passion for something, if you hear somebody who's really wanting to do something but feels that, you know, that they don't have the funds to do it, and it wasn't just the funds either, it was more a case of actually somebody's looked at my project and thinks it's a worthwhile project. It's not just me saying this would be a good idea. You know, you've got kind of an organisation behind you, so that when you're, you know, approaching people in other countries to try and organise this, it's not just you saying, I quite fancy doing this. You know, it's you saying, I've been given a grant by the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust, and this is what I'd like to do. So yeah, so that's probably enough talking for me. I think.
So shall I unmute everybody else, and then if they've any questions?
Yeah.
Okay, so if anybody's got any questions for Sarah, speak up.
Sarah.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah. Hi. Can I just ask you about canoeing?
Yeah.
I would love to learn to canoe, but I get incredible backache, and I wondered if there's anything you could put in a canoe that I don't know that may help with this backache that I get.
Yeah. So some of our canoes actually have backrests on the seats.
Yeah, I've tried those.
Have you tried those?
Sorry.
Have you
Yeah.
have you tried sitting on the floor of a canoe, maybe with a beanbag supporting you?
No, I've not. No, I've never thought of that.
That's a potentially other thing to try. It's not as easy, perhaps, to canoe when you're sitting on the bottom rather than the seats, but certainly yeah, if you I'm sorry, I can't see who's talking at the minute.
Susan.
So you've tried it up at Water Park, have you?
I've tried it at Water Park, yeah, and it happens every time, but I've learned since that I'm quite hypermobile, and I never knew, and it's all to do with that.
Well, yeah, so I guess if we knew you were coming and we knew that was an issue, we could put our heads together and come up with a bit more. I mean, I guess the backrests we've got don't come up very high, do they?
No.
So whether or not we could adapt
it's sort of like in the middle of the back.
Whether or not we could adapt.
I've had a look on the internet.
Yeah. Or like I say, or maybe trying to use bean bags to give you a bit more support.
Yeah, I could try that.
We've also we did cut the legs off a garden chair once, and put that in a canoe. So
Right.
that was a bit more like sitting in a proper chair rather than sitting
that
on a
might
canoe
work.
seat with the slight backrest. But obviously, because we'd cut the legs off, it was lower down. I don't know if we've still got that. That was definitely something we looked into.
Right.
Yeah, but other than that, I'm not sure. Have you tried kayaking? Is kayaking any different?
I do that.
Yeah, I think that's the one that we do. I think I've not tried the 2-seater.
Oh,
canoe.
sorry. Okay, right. Sorry, I thought you. Okay, so we have a bit of a distinction between when we talk about canoes and kayaks. So canoes for me would be the hang on. So canoes for me would be let me show you. Pull it up. Yeah, it would be that one. All right. I don't know if you can see
Right.
that.
No, I've not tried that.
So canoes will be the 2-person canoe, and there you are sitting on a seat, and they do have backrests, and they are more substantial than what you'll find in a kayak. And it's also you're not.
That might be the.
It might make a difference because in a kayak, obviously, your bottom's on the floor, your legs are out straight. On here, you're sitting on a seat, your knees are bent, and you have got a small backrest. But like I say, but in those canoes, we have chopped off the legs of a garden chair before now and put that in the canoe, which so for somebody that didn't have as much kind of upper body strength, that made a difference.
Right.
So I would try. So if it's been kayaking that's kind of not agreed with you, then it definitely would be worth trying you in a canoe.
Oh, I'll give that a try. Definitely.
Yeah.
We just need to be able to get there again now.
Oh no.
Can I just say, Sarah, I thought your trip was fascinating.
Oh,
really interesting. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Sarah, can I ask you? Did you see the Northern Lights when you was there?
No, it was the wrong time of year. So the Northern Lights are only visible in the winter months.
Right.
Because I think the way the phenomena works, I don't think they see it that far north in the summer. That's what they told me anyway. I think it's whether or not it ever happens to be seen, I don't know. But when I first asked the question, I said to David, "Oh, will we see the Northern Lights?" And he said, "No, not that time of year."
It's not dark enough, is it?
It just doesn't get dark enough. Yeah. So, but no, that would definitely be something that I would very much like to see. I think someone told me that Iceland is one of the most sort of the best guarantee. If you go to Iceland at the right time, that's quite a reasonable guarantee apparently to see them. So
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay.
So how long was your trip from start to finish?
So 10 weeks. I was away for 10 weeks. The longest of those trips, the Ray River trip, was 3 weeks.
Oh.
On the river. Yeah.
So what did your family and friends think when you said, right, I'm going to go out to the Ray River and paddle it with these guys that I've never met before? Were they a bit
apprehensive? Again, it's a bit weird really, because I mean, Adi just like, I looked at Adi and Adi went, "Well, do you think these guys are all right?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, the guy that I've spoken to seems all right." And he was like, "Okay." And my mum actually, I still look back and my mum and dad never said anything, never questioned me or anything, which I look back now and I just think is really weird that they didn't, have any sort of, or at least if they did, they didn't share it with me. Yeah, I don't know really. And it was even weirder than that, because before I met David Ray on the internet, I actually met a guy called Alex Gustav, And I came across him because he was the chairman of the Wilderness Canoe Association based in Toronto. And what happened was I got in touch with Alex, and I had one conversation with Alex, and then I would find these trips and I would run them all past Alex, and I'd say, oh, do you think this one would be okay for me, or do you think that one? And then, you know, I said, well, what do you think about this guy, and what do you think about that guy? And when I found this trip with David Ray, I got Alex to do a bit of research for me, and he came back and he said, yeah, he seems like a decent bloke, you know, and you know, what he says ties up with what, you know, you've told me. And that was the other thing. So AD looked at me and he said, so based on the opinion of a guy you met on the internet about another guy that you've met on the internet, do you think it's going to be all right?
Oh, like a friend of a friend, then, isn't he?
Is it something you'd like to do again with, say, AD and Joe as well? Would you like to take?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'd love to take them to Algonquin. Yeah, I'd love to take them to Algonquin. You know, it's the old adage at the minute. It's like, well, sometimes it's hard to know what's in shorter supply, time or money. And you know, the truth of it is to go to Canada is, you know, it's such a long way. It's such an expense. You don't want to go for like a couple of weeks, because in a couple of weeks you know, you'd get to Toronto, you'd pick up your car, you'd drive up there, you'd get your, you know, do you know what I mean? It'd be a 2-week trip, and you'd have like maybe 10 days on the river. And you think, if you're going to go all that way, you know, I'd want it to be a proper lengthy trip, and so that's kind of what makes things, you know, difficult in a way. Is you think, yeah, I don't want to just go for 2 weeks.
No.
You know, you want to go for a chunk of time, but of course, like this, yeah, work life gets in the way, doesn't it?
So
Yeah.
Is there any news on Water Park yet? Whether they're up to again or?
Well, I don't know what. In fact, I wonder if that's Gary's weekly update. I don't know what's official. I don't know what's official at the moment. But what I do know is that. Hang on. Okay, what I do know, I think this is confirming it, is that we are not going to attempt residentially until I think mid to end of October, and we would only be able to do that if the guidelines change. And I know that Gary and other heads of centres have sent a letter to whoever the person in government is that you send letters to try and get them to give the outdoor industry a bit more specific guidance, because at the minute I think we're being treated like the hotel and leisure industry, which of course we're not, but no. Schools are still being advised against residential trips, you see. So until that changes, I don't think we could open. We have done a handful of day visits with very, very reduced numbers to see how it might work. And I think what Gary's been doing is trying to change the residential bookings in September and October to day visit bookings for the schools. So I think that's the way forward, but I'm pretty sure that we're going to be on furlough now still till September.
Oh, that's a long time, isn't it?
I spoke to Jenny a few weeks ago when I think there was just Jenny, Gary and Annie had just gone back in to try and sort things out, and they were saying about the day visits. I was just wondering, with those, are you still limited to the groups of 6?
Well, at the moment, so at the minute, you see that even though schools can work in bubbles of, I think it's 15, we still come under the no more than 6 people in 6 different households. So when they came up the other week, of course, and we're one of them, so it's like five children and us really. But I think if they can get the guidance to reflect that if they're in school, whether that means they're physically in school or whether it's a school day and they are at Water Park, they can operate in their bubbles of 15. That would definitely make a difference. Although, I mean, lots of things would still apply. You know, the social distancing still applies. You know, the frequent hand washing, the washing of kit, the quarantining of kit, and all that kind of stuff.
Have you managed to get out in your canoe over COVID lockdown?
So when they relaxed the rules that said you can travel, especially my little boy, we've been up there quite a bit. Yeah, canoeing and sailing and things. So that's been really good. Yeah, we're very, very lucky. I mean, parts of the Lake District have been absolutely inundated.
Me and Jane were up in the lakes last week. We had a few days up there, so we walked around Derwent Water at one point and to Air Force.
Yeah, nice.
But it was interesting what you said when you started, Sarah, that you're not a professional in all the different things and you don't need to do all these adventures. It was something that when Aid was at Water Park as well, and I was talking to the two of you, and there's something that you both said to me, and that sort of gave me the confidence to go on and do the likes of my Lowland leader and try and develop my skills other ways. So it's something that's, I can't remember what it was, but whatever it was the two of you said, it just sort of stuck in my head and
good.
sort of made me want to go and do more of the outdoor things and get more of the qualifications and things. But
Good.
Probably money for old growth.
That must have been when you soon lost your sight, James.
I don't know how long will it be since Adie was at Water Park now.
Adie's been left 6 or 7 years now. 7 years maybe.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
has anybody else got any questions?
No, I don't think so. Thank you very much, Sarah. That's very good.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Sarah.
It's
Yeah.
been really
Well,
interesting.
If you
Been
want
really
any advice
interesting.
on the application for the Winston Churchill Trust, just get in touch.
No problems.
Very
All
good.
right.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's been very good. Thank you.
It's been really
Brilliant.
good.
Well,
Yeah.
nice to see you all.
Thank you
Yeah.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Sarah.
Thank you very much.
James.
It's a
Bye.
trip you'll always remember that.
Haven't forgotten that we owe you a day visit, James. We'll get it organised at some point.
Yeah, I was going to say I've still got that. I was going to ask you, but
Yeah.
once it gets there, so
All right.
no
Take
worries.
care now.
All right, thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.